In Revenge of the Sith, we watch the Jedi Temple fall in fire and betrayal. Clone troopers storm the gates, younglings are cut down, and Anakin Skywalker, once the Jedi's brightest hope, leads the slaughter himself. That night is remembered as the darkest in Jedi history, the night the Order ended. But what if it hadn't? What if the Jedi Temple Guards, sworn protectors of the Order, had been ready? What if they prevented Order 66 from succeeding? How would the galaxy have changed? Let's begin. Saral was no ordinary guard. Beneath the gold mask and robes, he had trained longer than most knights and led the Temple Guard ranks through peace and war. He wasn't prone to visions, but in the quiet hours of meditation he felt something coming, a weight pressing on the Force itself. It wasn't just danger. It was betrayal. He didn't know when or how, but he knew the temple would come under attack. And he also knew who had tried to nudge him toward treachery. Weeks earlier, Chancellor Palpatine himself had pulled Saral aside with an offer. "The Jedi have lost their way," the Chancellor whispered. "Join me when the end comes, and I will grant you power beyond the Council's imagination. You will stand as Grand Inquisitor in the new order." Saral listened. But he didn't obey. He couldn't. The Jedi were flawed, yes, but selling their souls to a politician who reeked of the dark side, that was a cure worse than the sickness. So when the march of boots echoed outside the temple walls, and the 5-0 first approached under cover of night, Saral was ready. He roused his comrades in the barracks, ignoring the confusion on their faces. "The temple is about to be attacked," he told them. "The clones come for us, and they will not stop until we're all dead. We defend this place, or we lose everything." Some thought it was madness. But the guards' oath was clear: protect the temple, no matter the cost. Within minutes, yellow blades hummed to life. Messengers carried warnings through the halls. Knights and masters were called to rally points. Older Jedi were tasked with guarding the younglings and preparing escape routes. Saral himself transmitted a desperate signal across the galaxy. "The Jedi have been betrayed. Defend yourselves." By the time the first blaster bolts lit up the courtyard, the Jedi weren't caught sleeping. They were waiting. The 5-0 first stormed forward in disciplined formation, blasters spitting red light into the night. But instead of helpless younglings or unprepared masters, they found a wall of Temple Guards and Jedi Knights barring their way. The first clash shook the very ground. Blaster fire ricocheted against spinning double-bladed sabers. Explosives tore chunks of marble, but Jedi countercharges threw clones into the air. The steps to the temple became a battlefield of fire and flashing yellow light. For a moment, the Jedi held. Dozens of clones fell. The guards' precision and discipline showed why they were feared even within the Order itself. But then, the battle shifted. Through the smoke came a blue lightsaber. Anakin Skywalker himself. He cut down 2 guards in the span of seconds, his fury unmatched. To the Jedi, his betrayal was almost unthinkable. Anakin had been their champion, their hero of the Clone Wars. Now he was their executioner. Saral knew the fight couldn't be won head-on. He ordered his men to fall back up the stairs, drawing Anakin and the clones into a carefully prepared trap. As Skywalker pressed forward, a hidden line of charges detonated beneath the stone steps. The staircase exploded in fire, collapsing under its own weight. Clones tumbled into the darkness, cut off from reinforcements. Those who had already crossed the courtyard now found themselves surrounded. From both flanks, guards surged forward, blades twirling in deadly arcs. Clones dropped by the dozens. For the first time that night, it was the troopers who broke ranks. Even Anakin, for all his skill, couldn't protect them all. Outnumbered, isolated, and hammered by Force pushes from every angle, he fought like a storm contained in human form. Jedi fell around him. But even he had limits. A lucky strike knocked his saber from his hand, and in that split second, Saral leveled a blaster scavenged from a fallen clone and fired a stun round. Anakin Skywalker collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Silence rippled through the courtyard. The unthinkable had happened. The Jedi Temple had not fallen. Saral raised his blade high. "This was no accident," he shouted. "We were betrayed, not by Skywalker, but by the Chancellor himself. He offered me power to turn against you. I refused. And tonight, we refuse him together." The guards roared in approval. Even the older masters, shaken and weary, could feel the truth in his words. With Anakin bound and the courtyard secured, Saral knew they had only one chance: strike back fast, before the Chancellor could twist the story. He led a strike force of guards and volunteers onto captured gunships, leaving the temple under watch of surviving masters. Their destination, the Senate. Inside the Great Chamber, Chancellor Palpatine stood before the Senate, his voice trembling with rehearsed fragility. He pointed to the scars across his face and told the gathered senators that the Jedi had tried to assassinate him. "It was only through the bravery of my friend Anakin Skywalker that I survived," he declared. "And for the safety of the Republic, I will remain in office until peace is assured." Applause thundered. Senators rose to cheer. To them, he was the victim of Jedi treachery. But then came a new sound: slow, deliberate clapping. The crowd turned to see a lone temple guard standing in one of the repulsor pods, yellow saber still clipped at his belt. Senate commandos rushed forward, weapons raised. "Arrest this traitor," Palpatine ordered. Saral's voice cut through the hall. "Is this how the Republic works? One man speaks, and the rest are silenced? Then hear this." He held up a holodisc. The recording flickered to life, revealing Palpatine's private words. The promises he had made to Saral. The offer of power. The pledge to destroy the Jedi. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Palpatine tried to spin it, claiming he was only recruiting spies to uncover Jedi corruption, but senators pressed harder. Why had he never shared this evidence? Why had he concealed it while asking for emergency powers? The momentum shifted. Bail Organa and others demanded an investigation. Palpatine was stripped of his emergency authority and placed under guard. The clones were ordered to stand down. The Sith's careful plan had been broken, at least for now. Back at the temple, relief mingled with unease. Palpatine's arrest had spared them immediate annihilation, but the order itself was fractured. Entire legions of Jedi had already fallen across the galaxy as clones executed Order 66 elsewhere. Only the temple's foresight had spared them. And in the power vacuum, Saral stepped forward. With much of the council dead or scattered, he claimed the role of acting leader. "The Senate nearly outlawed us once. They will do so again. We must reform the Order, apart from their politics. No more chains to the Republic." Younger Jedi, scarred and angry, rallied to him. To them, Saral was the hero who had saved the temple when no one else could. But not all agreed. When Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda returned from the front lines, they were troubled by his defiance. The Jedi had always served the Republic. To walk away now was dangerous. The council chambers filled with bitter arguments. Some wanted to accept the Senate's apology and rebuild ties. Others, led by Saral, argued for independence, a Jedi Order free from political entanglements. The debate was fierce, and no resolution came easily. But while they argued, the galaxy moved on. Because one truth remained: Palpatine was still alive. Though disgraced, though under guard, his power and his network of spies were not gone. From his cell, he whispered to allies, stoking fear and resentment. His dark side influence stretched further than the Jedi realized. And across the stars, clones continued to obey his hidden programming. Many Jedi still died, betrayed by the men they trusted. Saral insisted this proved his point. "The Senate cannot protect us," he said. "They cannot even control their own armies. The Jedi must stand alone." But Yoda and Obi-Wan were unconvinced. "Alone, we are not strong enough. United, we must remain." The Order teetered on the edge of a new civil war, just as the Sith had always intended. For now, the temple still stood. Younglings were alive. Hundreds of Jedi had been saved from certain death. And for the first time in a millennium, the galaxy saw the Chancellor in chains rather than the Jedi. But no one knew how long that would last. The Sith had waited centuries for this moment. One failed strike would not end their plans. And deep within his cell, Palpatine smiled. Because preventing Order 66 had saved the Jedi, but it had also given him new opportunities. The Jedi Temple still stood, but the Order was fractured. Across the galaxy, clone battalions continued carrying out Order 66, cutting down Jedi who had no warning and no defenses. Thousands still perished. Their lives ended in distant outposts, far from Coruscant. But for the first time in generations, the temple itself had survived an attack. Hundreds of younglings and Padawans had escaped into hiding. Older knights, who would have been slaughtered in their sleep, now stood ready to fight another day. Yet survival brought new questions, and at the center of them was the Temple Guard commander who had made it possible, Saral Gabam. In the aftermath, Saral took command of the defenses. With most of the council dead or missing, few challenged him. The survivors looked to him for direction. He had foreseen the betrayal. He had resisted Palpatine's bribes. He had captured Anakin Skywalker alive. The younger Jedi saw him as a savior. To them, the old council had failed. It had been blind to the Sith, blind to the Chancellor's ambitions, blind to the danger growing under their own roof. Saral was different. He wasn't afraid to speak plainly. He wasn't afraid to act. But his vision for the Order clashed with the Jedi Masters, who returned from the front. When Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda arrived, battle-weary and shaken, they were horrified to find Saral openly calling for independence from the Republic. The Jedi are guardians of peace, Obi-Wan argued. If we sever ties with the Senate, we will lose the trust of the very people we swore to protect. Saral countered with cold logic. The Senate nearly cheered when Palpatine declared us traitors. They applauded our execution. How can you still call them our allies? We must stand apart or be destroyed. The chamber grew divided. Older Jedi, shaped by centuries of tradition, clung to the Republic. But the scarred survivors of the Temple, many of them young and angry, sided with Saral. The Order was split between past and future. Meanwhile, Anakin Skywalker lay imprisoned in the Temple's lower cells. Bound in stun cuffs, stripped of his saber, he was a shadow of the hero who had once led fleets to victory. Saral visited him often, speaking through the bars. The Chancellor promised you power. What did he offer you, Skywalker? Anakin's eyes burned with shame. He promised me a way to save Padme. He fed me nightmares. And I believed him. Saral leaned closer. The dark side manipulates. You know that now. But the Jedi are not blameless either. They left you desperate enough to listen to him. You can still make this right. Testify. Expose Palpatine for what he is. At first, Anakin refused. He saw no path forward except despair. But in the days that followed, Saral pressed harder. He revealed secrets from the restricted archives, ancient techniques of healing that even Jedi had long suppressed. The Force holds power beyond what the Sith claim, Saral told him. Help us, and I will give you the knowledge you seek. It was a gamble, and in the end, Anakin agreed. When the Senate convened again, Palpatine stood chained and defiant. His voice was smooth as ever, insisting that his scars and wounds were proof of Jedi treachery. He still commanded loyalty from many senators who had prospered under his rule. But then Anakin Skywalker appeared. Shackled but unbroken, he walked to the center of the chamber and raised his voice for all to hear. I was deceived, he said. Palpatine is not the savior of the Republic. He is the Sith Lord who has orchestrated this entire war. He promised me power. He confessed to killing his own master. He ordered the clones to destroy the Jedi. Shock rippled through the hall. The words carried weight not just because of who spoke them, but because of what he represented. The Republic's war hero, once Palpatine's closest ally, now turning against him. The vote was swift. Palpatine was condemned, his powers revoked. He was ordered detained until a full trial could be held. The Sith Lord had been unmasked before the entire galaxy. For a brief moment, hope returned. The clones, now without a commander-in-chief, pulled back from their pursuit of Jedi. Senate loyalists apologized to the survivors. Aid was promised to rebuild the temple. It looked as though the nightmare had ended. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. Saral rejected the Senate's offers. We will not rebuild our order on the Republic's leash, he declared. If we are to survive, we must walk our own path. The words struck deep. Some senators bristled, demanding the Jedi accept oversight. Others whispered of rebellion if the Jedi grew too independent. And within the temple, fault lines widened. Yoda counseled patience, urging the Jedi to work with what allies they had left. Obi-Wan warned that Saral's defiance would only provoke more fear. But Saral pressed on. He reorganized the guards into strike teams. He established new outposts across the Outer Rim, free from Senate control. To his followers, this was the birth of a new Jedi Order, one unshackled from politics. To his critics, it was the first step toward schism. What the Jedi didn't realize was that Palpatine's influence hadn't ended with his arrest. In the shadows of his cell, he whispered to loyalists. Spies carried his words into the Senate chambers. Fear spread again. And then, one night, he was gone. Guards were found dead, locks had been tampered with. The most powerful prisoner in galactic history had slipped through their fingers. To the public, it looked like incompetence, and the blame fell squarely on the Jedi. Obi-Wan and Yoda, who had urged cooperation with the Senate, were branded as negligent, their credibility shattered. Saral, on the other hand, gained more followers. "I warned you," he told the survivors. "The Senate cannot keep us safe, only we can protect ourselves." But Yoda sensed something darker. Palpatine's escape was no mere accident. It was part of a larger design, and the Jedi were walking into it blind. It wasn't long before Palpatine struck again. Yoda and Obi-Wan tracked him to a forgotten installation, a place humming with dark energy. When they entered the chamber, they found him waiting. No longer the weary politician, but Darth Sidious in his full, terrible power. "You think chains could hold me?" he sneered. "The Republic is mine, the galaxy is mine, and the Jedi will burn." The duel exploded in fury. Lightning ripped through the air. Blades clashed in showers of sparks. The two Jedi Masters pressed him hard, their experience and unity forcing Sidious back step by step. For the first time, the Dark Lord faltered. But reinforcements arrived, not for the Jedi, but against them. Saral entered the chamber with Anakin at his side, his face grim. "The old ways are finished," he said. "This war ends tonight." Sidious laughed, even as sweat poured down his scarred face. "Yes, end it. Strike them down. Finish what I began." But Saral didn't serve Sidious. He served only his vision, and to him, Yoda and Obi-Wan were relics that stood in the way. The chamber erupted again, Jedi against Jedi, the Order tearing itself apart even as the Sith laughed. Blades whirled in every direction. Anakin clashed with Obi-Wan, his former master. Every strike, echoing with years of trust, turned to doubt. Saral pressed Yoda with a precision that matched the Grand Master's agility. And then came the final betrayal. Barriss Offee, long silent, revealed her hand. To the Jedi, she had once been a traitor, imprisoned for her role in bombing the temple. But Saral had freed her, whispering that the old ways must be purged. Now she sealed the chamber doors and turned her blade not against Saral but against everyone. "The cycle must break," she said, and with a final act of sacrifice, she unleashed the hidden swarm of microdroids within her body, igniting a storm of fire that consumed the chamber. When the smoke cleared, Sidious lay lifeless. Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Barriss were gone with him. Saral and Anakin survived. The old masters were dead. The Order was theirs. To the galaxy, the story was simple. Yoda and Obi-Wan had perished bringing the Sith Lord to justice. Anakin Skywalker had been killed in action. And Master Saral Gabam now stood as the sole leader of the Jedi. Under his command, the Order relocated to the Outer Rim, building strongholds away from Coruscant. With the Republic still reeling and the Separatist war dragging on without Sidious to direct it, the Jedi filled the vacuum. They were no longer just guardians of peace. They were a faction in their own right, wielding influence across the stars. The Temple had not fallen that night, but something else had, the dream of what the Jedi once were. So what if the Jedi Temple Guards had prevented Order 66? In the short term, hundreds of Jedi would have been saved. The Senate would have seen Palpatine unmasked. The Sith Lord himself might even have been defeated. But survival came at a cost. The unity of the Order shattered. The young turned against the old. And in their desperation to survive, the Jedi risked becoming the very thing they once opposed, a power-hungry faction chasing control of the galaxy. In a way, the Sith still won, not through slaughter, but through division. Because the truth is, preventing Order 66 would not have guaranteed peace, it would only have changed the battlefield. And the fate of the Jedi would remain as fragile as ever. If you enjoyed this alternate timeline, don't forget to like and subscribe for more Star Wars stories. And remember, the Force is with us, always.